Anyway, uh, welcome here again. Like I said, sorry for the long intro. Eating dinner, and I still might eat my dinner like an ASMR stream. Oh, sorry. Uh, okay. So if you're new here, the purpose of this stream basically is to create a space where you are welcome to come up and share wherever you're at, and we discuss and talk about. And hello, I'm glad that you're eating with me because this is awkward. I don't know if you've ever forgot uh, about eating, but I do it all the time. So, one sec. I don't know. There we go. No. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, this says share where you're at anonymously, wherever you or whatever you'd like to talk about, come as you are. Scan the QR code, go to that link, and you'll be able to jump on the stream and chat. I am just not doing well today. I think I posted recently on my social media. I was talking about suffering, and I was talking about the wrestle of, let me see, I'm just gonna make sure okay. Yeah, it was with the question, how are you? And I really struggle with that question because are they asking me what the question is? Are they asking me like how I'm doing, or or is it just a greeting, which traditionally it is? And so I posted like I want to tell people how I'm doing, and I'm not doing that great. And it's not because of things I've done that I'm feeling this way and struggling with shame. But it's like this anticipation of just not being seen or heard, and my situation being judged without people actually doing the work to understand what's going on. Um, I feel it's frustrating because a lot of the time I can be surrounded by people, like I've said in the past, if people have been here before, I can be surrounded by people and feel very alone, even though I'm surrounded by people. And it's the worst feeling because it's like I actually want to answer the question of how I'm doing. I want to tell people what I'm, how I'm doing, where I'm at, how I'm just wrestling with grief. Um, there's a quote of a book that I'm reading. I'll just wait for people to join, so I'm just gonna talk until they do. I don't know if anyone's gonna join tonight. This is more practice than anything, but uh, it's from a book. It says, "We don't have language for lament because we don't view weakness as an expected reality. We don't have space to grieve because we're too busy judging grief or seeking its relief to speak its truth out loud." Um, I find the season that I'm in, admittedly, I feel like I'm trying to like brute force my way through grief. It's like maybe if I do what other people do that I witness them doing, where they just pretend it doesn't exist, or um they just bury it and move on. Uh or maybe I can create circumstances around it where I'm doing great. For example, I made my video sharing about being autistic on YouTube, and I think a lot of people took that as like a triumphant thing. And though, I mean, there is a lot of triumph in finally living in line with who I've been made to be. Admittedly, I think it was also a public declaration because it was like almost an accountability to where I was at. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but it felt like it was something I had to do. But then there are things around my life, like even it could be even this thing. Does this mean that I'm doing well? So I don't. It's like I can't create circumstances around it to to actually avoid. And I thought even understanding that would help me, but it has not. I'm just getting wrecked, and so it really sucks. And I wish I could have more conversations with people in person, but the people in person are the yeah, it's difficult. And then I wrestle with am I like I love my job and where I'm working right now, but I'm like, is work becoming an escape from this reality that I'm facing? Because when I'm outside of work, I feel like it's just like I get blitzed by everything, whereas work is so distracting and it's a good reminder of who I am and it's a good reminder of um, my skills and uh, I get to be loved and it's wonderful. And then I come back into and I just feel none of that. I feel empty and hollow and it sucks. So am I using my job, my work as an escape? I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has felt that way. Uh, you know, I I imagine that people have felt that way where actually I think it's common and for most people they have some vice or some way of I don't know what you would call it, numbing. uh, some people play video games, some people exercise, some people do work, some people do drugs, drink. I'm drinking pink lemonade or whatever this is. But I don't mean that, obviously. So, yeah, I don't know. It it sucks because I even though I say like in the beginning you're not alone and I guess today that emphasis on you're not alone being I feel these these crappy feelings too. These horrible and I'm not saying I shouldn't, but sometimes people can especially in social media and in these kind of environments can put on this outside appearance as to like hey I'm doing great, I'm doing fantastic, let me carry your burdens or whatever, let me at least in this kind of role and it's like you know uh but I believe that if stuff that I've learned is if I don't so I wrote at the end of my post something that came from the book as well. It says, we remain a people of hope when we're honest about our hopelessness. If there's no space for grief, hopelessness, desolation, then it tells me that there isn't actually hope. Like it doesn't have any value because it doesn't have the other side to it. It doesn't have, you can't have light without the dark, so to speak. Um, and and so I'm trying to be vocal about where I'm at, um, you know, because I believe in doing so, it is human. Uh, and I believe that we live in a culture of shame and fear and a lot of things. And so if I can get it out there, hopefully other people will be able to be seen by me sharing those things, and me being seen and communicating like I am still hopeful because I'm admitting that I struggle. But I don't know. Those are some random thoughts that I've been thinking about uh, this week. Um, on a different topic, since I'm still waiting for people, uh, I was also thinking about. So I'm doing a lot of research into regards to how to communicate. So part of my other job is to go to employers, housing providers, and places of education, and talk to them about neurodiversity as well as autism, and articulate to them, which is so ironic to like someone like myself who, in my opinion, really struggles with communication, is somehow supposed to bridge a gap that is taking place, where oftentimes when I communicate to people, uh, I'm misunderstood. I'm eh, not intentionally, but like I might say something. This is something I've noticed. So somebody might, or I might say like, I don't like fish. And then they'll think that I'm attacking their cooking or the dinner that they decided to serve, 3 weeks ago at some, like I don't get it because it's just a piece of information. But that's how it goes. And it's frustrating. But anyway, so what I was thinking about, it's like I'm trying to solve a puzzle. I'm trying to find the right piece of logic in order to make people help people to understand. So that there's like a gap in empathy that is called the double empathy problem. But the way that I can understand it, or the way that I've been processing, and this is really fascinating, is if you have a autistic and non-autistic individuals, the autistic individuals, in my experience, um, tend to communicate from a place of logic and reason, and the purpose is to share information or facts, essentially, whereas the non-autistic individuals is a more of a social affair. And so you can say the same exact words. Sorry, and maybe it's not that, but you can use the same words, the same English, right? And but the how and why the words and the way that they were used are chosen from each group, the autistic and non-autistic, is different. And so if you don't understand that, then it might make it difficult for you to understand, like if your filter and view is this person is communicating to me from a social aspect, and so you put a little social filter on top of it, like basically I think there's like a social hierarchy type system, people saying things in order to feel acceptance. There's a whole bunch of aspects that don't actually make sense to me. And not that they don't make sense, but they just don't naturally consciously happen for me, whereas it does for non-autistics. And so uh where's it going with all that? Um, so, and that's something I do. I forget what I'm saying in the middle of, because I'm trying to grab like all these different thoughts and jumping around. But it's a fascinating thought anyway, because if you think about it, you could argue in that in some dynamics and aspects that autistic individuals aren't actually um and this is a wrestle, and I'm still processing. I could be completely wrong. Um, But okay, so if the diagnosis criteria is put together by non-autistic individuals through a non-autistic lens, then anything that isn't that is going to look like a deficit, right? But what I've noticed, because I work with a lot of autistic young people, is we don't have these breakdowns in communication in the same way that I do with other people outside of this that space. And it's extremely fascinating to think about, because there's so many implications if that ends up being somewhat correct. To me, I look at things in a more, again, processing, thinking, could be completely wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about, not an expert, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Um, from a social model of disability, basically the world that we live in is made for a particular type of person, and anyone that isn't that person, whether it be, I mean, we did that with race and sex and, neurotype now. Um, Anything that's different than that is disabled by the way that the world works and acts, like throughout this pathologized way of understanding. It's very it, because if you think about some of those aspects, you and again, this is like where there's, because there's obviously, being autistic, there's a lot of debilitating aspects of it. But I guess what I'm getting at is, I think that there are other aspects that aren't deficits. Like social things aren't deficits. It's actually just a misunderstanding as to the purpose of communication. I actually also believe that that is true about identity. So autistic individuals, in my experience, draw identity from, and I gotta try and remember. So like the who uh like our values, sorry, our values versus non-autistics is about what they do and stuff like that. It's very interesting. So identity is the same thing, but then, somebody might ask me, what is it, like who are you? And I will draw from my values and things, whereas other people, like non-autistics, will draw from the things they kind of do. And it's very, like, again, if you can, to me, it's really interesting, because both sides of the neurotypes have a lack of and it's this double empathy problem, have a lack of understanding each other, because you can't see a world that you haven't experienced or don't understand. um a lot of things that non-autistics do, because the way the world is structured, um it comes non-consciously, it just comes naturally, where I think I have to think about things consciously within context. And anyway, it's interesting. I could just ramble about this stuff forever. um I don't know if anyone has any thoughts. Eating my terrible cooked food here. Another example that I like to give to people, and somebody has written about, they call it the very grand emotions. So, common argument with autistics is that they don't have empathy and emotions, and I would argue that I probably have empathy, but even more so than most people. Like when I watch a show or a movie, or like I feel what people are feeling, because I feel like I have a logic and understanding as to why they feel that way. But if I don't have that, then it's difficult. So an example of this difference that takes place. So um, there was a time when I got to go to Niagara Falls, and I use this example because everyone loves Niagara Falls, like for the most part, where you're there to go and see it, right? And I'm on the boat. I don't know what it's called. I think in America it's the Maid of the Mist, and then there's another one. I was on the Canada side, but um, and you're getting closer, and you can just feel all the water, and you can hear it and see it, and you're wearing like uh, it's like a plastic bag to shield you from the water. Anyway, everyone's got their phones out and they're recording, and the thing that I'm doing is I'm ridiculous. I'm acting like a kid. I'm like jumping up and down. I'm like basically like, guys, like look, like they're all looking at it, but it's almost like they aren't seeing it in the same wonder, I guess. And so anyway, so the thing that was going on in my head was the logic behind the emotion, and I believe that that's how I understand emotions. I started thinking about the sheer amount of water that was just overflowing, like, and it just kept going, and I'm like trying to calculate it, my brain's like breaking. And so even though everyone is there experiencing the same thing, um everyone's got their phones out recording, I'm jumping it up and down like a little kid because the emotion and the logic of it has broken me. And so people might say I don't have empathy or emotion, but it's not true. It just looks different than pulling out my cell phone and recording it. Um, so again, there's these differences that take place that aren't, in my opinion, deficits. They're just different in the way they happen. But a lot of people, I mean, this is a newer thought, newer thinking. Uh, to me, it's a bit more progressive. I don't know, whatever word you want to use there, but it it like, if you can, like, I guess my job is to help people wrap their brain around that. And I don't know if it's a sufficient way. I'm still trying to figure out, because in some ways it's almost like the way I describe it as well is it's like depression. I don't know if anyone's had depression, but um oh, give me one sec. I'll respond to that comment because it's interesting. Um, so with depression, uh, people, and then if you've been depressed, you understand this, that people that have not had depression, unless they're really trained or know someone or have had some sort of experience, will not understand depression. They don't understand why you can't get out of bed, or you can't do things, or you're always sad. Just stop being sad, think about happy things. Stupid things like that. Uh, and so I feel like being autistic is like being depressed in the sense that unless you have it, you can't understand. And the same with being neurotypical. I can't really understand. I can mirror and mimic aspects of it, but I can't trick anyone. I can't actually be, that's like, I've tried masking and I burnt out and it was horrible, but I can't do that. And so, yeah. One of the comments we have is, having this battle with my child where we are having trouble understanding each other. Mostly, he can't see my perspective or others, and I'm struggling to know what battles to fight if that makes sense. If he's autistic, then I would say that, um, and I, again, not an expert, no, don't really know, but the way that people can convince me or see perspective is by logic, by explaining it in a way, and you can't cheat. You can't you can't add emotional charged language. It doesn't matter to me. You can't manipulate me or bribe me or make me change my opinion if it doesn't make sense, if it's not a logical kind of rational argument. I really can't side with it. And so it might seem like to others I don't see their perspective, but to me, their perspective usually doesn't make sense because it is, in my opinion, a lot of the times charged by emotions. It's and this is something I've witnessed with people where they remember things differently because of how they felt rather than what actually took place. But I mean, I mean, that would be difficult because I know in the past people have tried to talk to me about something and I'm just not getting it, and how frustrating it can be for them. And everyone else seems to get it, but not me. And but again, there's something about our brains where we think we're right because we're the ones saying or thinking it. And I imagine that if someone is autistic, they're probably used to people telling them otherwise. Like again, it's like you're from a different world. So the way that you process and understand and go through and do things is fundamentally different. Um, but again, it's more if you can convince me, if you can create a case that helps me to understand, usually I can change. It's one of the things I appreciate about my brain in some ways because I am not built in a house of, at least in my opinion, I'm not built in this house of the structure of truths that are absolute. And then and that if someone starts hitting it, I push back and I get angry. I don't do that. Uh, if if you can make an argument that is sound and I can see it, and usually it can sway me to at least think about or approach it in a different way. Also, most people when they have conversations are doing it so they can convince you rather than providing a point and having a dialogue or a conversation around that point. And so, at least in my experience, another thing is people might say I'm rigid or inflexible, but they really don't know, especially if it's a special interest, how like how much research or how much I've thought about something or how, and I could be wrong, but generally, um, I have done like if you need a good microwave, and I've done research or searched on it, I could find you, give me a price point, and I'll find you the best microwave that's out there. I'll watch tons of videos and reviews and read all the comments and filter through and find flaws and errors and all sorts of things. And but to other people, and I'm just using a microwave as an example, um, they don't know that. They don't see that. They think that I just have an opinion. But usually I don't really speak to things I don't have an opinion about. So maybe like people will be like, you're not talking a lot. It's like, because I have nothing to say. I have nothing to add to this conversation. Or uh, and sometimes I'll even say like, I don't know, like this is an area I'm not familiar with. I like some hot button topics. I don't have an informed opinion, like political things, for example. I haven't done enough research on either party to have valid opinion or thought around what they are doing or which side I'm with. I find that I'm mostly politically homeless anyway because you have a group that decides something and then 4 years later, usually another group or like whatever amount of time, they just undo it. It's just like this. And then also people will decide that they agree with a party regardless, or sorry, they'll stand with whatever group regardless if they agree or not because it's their group. Those are weird biases I don't understand. um I would agree with someone based on what they're saying regardless of where they stand. It's why I think, at least for myself, I don't struggle with things like racism or sexism or like seeing other people. Like I see people as Ern Luther, where he talks about by their character. Basically, I forgot what the line is. I'm trying to draw it from my head, but um, anyway, like people's character is how I see people, not their external things that are relevant to information about them. And not irrelevant, but it doesn't it's not them, like in the same way that yeah, anyway. It's just interesting that so anyway, I can go rambling on that topic because this is what my brain does. I'll see where why do you, I guess my question would be, why do you want him to see your perspective, and have you taken the time to know his perspective rather than seeing it as wrong because you aren't able to understand or it is incorrect? Try and see how they arrive to that idea, that conclusion. um yeah, I mean, even in normal life, I find people aren't able to tell me. They can give me an opinion, but they can't tell me how they got to that opinion or why they're thinking those things. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I can do that sometimes too, but it's interesting that we do that. So elaborate. Um, hmm. Well, I guess, and I'm not a parent, so I don't know how it goes, but I would be more exploring why someone arrived at something rather than them giving me what I think is the right answer. Um, if that makes sense. So they might have a perspective on how they believe something to be done, and you're trying to tell them otherwise. Um, have you explained to them why that uh, why you believe that whatever, like, again, it's hard to know without context because the context is important. Context like I can apply this situation to anything, but without context it's not really going to be able to help too much. I'm just trying to come at it within how I would think about things, um, as an autistic, if he is. Again, the misunderstandings between parent and child comes from uh, I imagine both struggling to see each other's world and understand it. So take, if I was to elaborate, take the time to understand his world. And I mean, you can't always do that, I imagine, as a parent. I got the diagnosis of, what is it, oppositional defiant disorder. Which is hilarious because to me it was because I was just asking questions. Why are we doing it this way? What is going on? And the thing with autistics that I've come to learn is they need to understand how something works and operates. It's not a question to authority. It's not challenging the system, not trying to burn it down. They're literally just trying to understand the process so that they can work within it. Or like myself, I can see gaps and I want to. Sorry, no, I said the wrong word above that. Above what? I'm sorry, I don't understand. um, but anyway, uh, as a side note, I've been talking for a while. If you're new to the stream, the purpose of this stream is not just hear me rant and talk about the world of being autistic versus not and whatever. It's just the way that I understand it. But the purpose is to create space for people to come up and to be able to share where they're at, what's going on, their victories, their challenges, things they wish people could know, or things they just need to get out there in the open in an anonymous way so that they might be witnessed empathetically. Um, And so if you wanted to do that, you're able to scan the QR code on the bottom left. And once you do that, or enter the website, it will take you to a link that will allow you to join the stream as a guest once you approve your microphone and camera. And your camera won't be on, it'll just be your microphone so I can hear you. But yeah. Anyway. So yeah. What else I'm thinking about? I was having a conversation with one of these autistic young people, and he was telling me about, because he tends to say a lot of abrasive things, like really abrasive, almost like reactionary. Like he kind of figures out what will kind of bother people and kind of stays in that lane. Uh, and the people around mostly ignore it, but sometimes he'll get something and get a reaction. And I was getting to talk to him one-on-one earlier this week, and it was funny because he admitted to me he knew that he was being abrasive. He knew that he was being difficult and challenging. And, you know, and I'm like, it must be so lonely to be in that place. And he's like, yeah, I don't have any friends. I don't have anyone I connect with. And I was really heartbroken for this young person because he was aware of what he was doing. But like, so for myself, I would probably just shut down and stop talking. But for him, it's like, if I reject people first, if I push them away first, if I cause them to not like me first, then I don't need to risk being loved. I don't need to risk being heard or seen or misunderstood or anything. I can just pretend I don't care. And this is an unprofessional observation based on patterns that I in my own life and others that I've witnessed. And I could be completely wrong about this young person, but I felt so horrible for him. I'm like, I wish, because he's really smart, very articulate, and very much more than I am. And he can be persuasive. And it's just like, if he had a shift of like where he put that energy, he might be able to thrive better. But it's like, it's funny that the things we do to protect ourselves, and sometimes we don't even realize it. Because I eventually kept talking with him and just kept like letting him talk about whatever, and you could tell like he knows. He shares a lot of things similar to me, but because info dumping is another thing autistics love doing. If you get them talking about a special interest, and when I say special interest, I don't mean like your hobby. I'm like, when autistics have interests around things, it's just like laser focused. But what is saying? Yeah, when you get so this young person talking about his special interest, it's like he doesn't get to talk to anyone about these things. Like it was so niche. It was like World War II. Ah, forget exactly what it was within like World War II stuff, but he was so stoked to be able to share with me all this stuff he's learning. It reminded me of how uh, I help facilitate and run a group talking about crypto and world. Like, if you start getting me going about finance in the world, then I find people with autism have a lot. Sorry, I just saw a comment. I'm reading it. I find out people with autism have a lot of empathy and emotions. In my opinion, people miss and understand autism and label them in a certain way. Misunderstand autism and label. When you say labeling them in a certain way, I guess, what do you mean by that? And I did talk about that earlier. If you watched, you just like I talked about this giant rant about how uh, empathy is something that has been traditionally something that autistics don't have, or feelings, but it's actually just a different way of expressing and understanding and viewing the world. So I was talking about earlier a little bit about how, for example, um, the purpose of communication is different, in my opinion, in my experience with autistics. So it's logical information gathering on the autistic side. Non-autistics, it's more social. And so because there's that lack of understanding that there's different reason why those things are happening, it causes a lot of misunderstandings. Basically, it's hard to understand a world that you don't come from or view. So when they say like people who are autistic lack empathy, it's they lack neurotypical empathy, but they don't understand that the actions and the things that we do express that empathy is just in a different way. Um, so, but it does suck to be labeled. It sucks to have motives ascribed to you through that filter. And trust me, I know that experience. Recently, I, I got my diagnosis of being autistic recently, and I I remember having conversations with people, and it's like you're just, and they don't understand. They don't come from that world. They're like, you're just looking for an excuse to the reason you are. You don't want to work on things. You're lazy, blah, blah, like a lot of horrible things. And it's like, well, first of all, if I went to a doctor and the doctor told me, you have, you know, you're smoking all your life, you have lung cancer, you can either keep smoking and die, or you can change it. And I feel like the thing that was misunderstood with that is in having a diagnosis and having a way to define whatever this is, I was able to navigate it, to be able to build tools and ways of doing it differently. But it does take work to figure that stuff out. Um, but to the other people on the outside, yeah, I'm lazy. I don't care. I'm not interested. And it's frustrating. Um, I used to go to places, and I've talked about this before, where because I I have a flat effect, I don't have a lot of emotions. I think that's because of trauma, but it's also I think it's trauma from my past, but also trauma where I don't I I probably tried to express emotions when I was younger, but it wasn't in the way that it was supposed to. So I stopped expressing those emotions. An example is I'd be with a friend at the mall, and she'd be like, why aren't you having a good time? And I'd be like, what do you mean? And I'd be like, you're not smiling. And I'm like, why do I have to be smiling to be having a good time? Um, and so it's like you they my experience is people ascribe different motives, like you're saying. Um, but I'm still having those emotions and that experience. I was having a great time that day, actually. But now I got to think about, am I smiling enough? So I got to add that onto my experience of what I'm doing, which is miserable. Yeah, uh, I tend to watch a lot of shows or movies, and I realize I used to think I was like too emotional, because again, once I have logic and I can connect it to like why, like understand why someone is feeling, it doesn't matter if they're real or not. Like I'm like crying, or I'm really into whatever's like happening to like a ridiculous degree. um, sometimes when I'm not doing good, I tend to actually watch or do like uh shows or things to like feel whatever the character is feeling. Like I remember when I was depressed, I watched BoJack Horseman, which was really intense, but it was perfect for the season I found myself in. I could feel those emotions that I kind of felt like I needed to, because oftentimes, at least for myself, and I know some other autistics where they're feeling the emotions, they're probably really complex and they can't understand them because they do look different. And so usually it takes longer. It's almost like the way that I've explained it to people, it's like my body um catches up. I so somebody might say something or do something and I like my body will react. Sorry, my and then my brain catches up to it like a couple days later. It's like, oh, that's why I was that's why I was feeling or reacted or did those things. It's weird because like some part of me understands and then there's another part that doesn't until later. It's fascinating when you start thinking about how much we are actually in control of our brains. But I've already talked about that and rant about that at another point. Yeah. Sorry. So I don't know if anyone's out there who, has any other thoughts, or maybe they want to ask me something about being autistic, whether it be my journey, my perspective on certain things, or what they feel free to ask whatever. I'm not going to get offended or upset. I really want to help try and facilitate a conversation if that's what people want to do. But it's also, I would love to just talk with someone, like join the stream and, and chat, rather than me just pulling things out of the air. Because I'm uh, yeah, I'm trying to think of what else I could talk about. Um, hmm. This is a side note thing. I'm really excited for the new Zelda that's coming out on the 12th. I think that's going to get Game of the Year, and it's going to make a bazillion copies sold. And yes, very literally, that's how many they're going to sell. Uh, I've always loved Legend of Zelda, especially the character of Link. And I didn't realize it when I was younger as a kid. Um, but I think about it now, and at least in the game Ocarina of Time, which is the one I grew up with. So whatever Zelda you played, um, that's the one that is your favorite, like whatever you grew up with. So that one was mine. And the character in that game lives in a forest with a bunch of other people who live in the forest, and they all have fairies, and he doesn't. And he also doesn't speak. And it's interesting how much that part of, like, I didn't get it when I was a kid, but I like super related to this character in a video game who was feeling a lot of, or was experiencing a world very similar to the one I was. Uh, and so getting to be a hero in that world, getting to, uh, rescue and bring value and love the people in it through this character was really awesome. And I just, but then, yeah, so it's something I was reflecting on the other day when I was thinking about how I always loved Legend of Zelda. Um, it is more than just video games. I also appreciate video games because when I was growing up, um, there wasn't a lot of things I was good at. And when I say that, I don't mean I wasn't good at things, but I wasn't good at the things that people wanted me to be good at. So I wasn't athletic. I wasn't, outdoorsy, didn't have a lot of friends, wasn't, um, But when I played a video game and it says like good job, or it validates you as a person sometimes. And I definitely appreciated that growing up as a kid, when all the messages that I got were not that. And the people in the video games didn't care um, about my, at the time, in the way that I understood it, my weaknesses or my deficits or my burden, like feeling like I'm worthless or whatever. Like, they, it's weird. It was in some ways therapeutic. So I've always had an appreciation for video games. If no one's going to join, I can keep talking about them. I've I've lately been playing. I just played through a game, and you might notice some influence and stuff. I play the music sometimes in the stream, and been playing through the Persona series, particularly playing Persona 4. And it's silly because it's about it's it's a JRPG, sort of about a group of high school students and their process of growing up, and building connections with others. But the parts that I find very fascinating and interesting is the psychology and philosophy that's behind a lot of it, and that it explores. Uh, it's oh, I could get into that if people were interested, but um, I've been playing a lot of video games lately. I was talking about escapism earlier, and it can be a wrestle in the past, how I used to use video games a lot as an escape, because again, you play the game, the characters like you, they'll even say stuff like that. Or um you could be playing a multiplayer game working in a competitive way, and I don't do that anymore because, I mean, they're so highly competitive, and you have to be just grinding all the time to stay up to, at least to the level that I was playing, and it's exhausting. I don't really care. I, I really don't care. Uh, but yeah, um, is anyone uh, is how I'm curious how other people are doing. What's been on their mind? If they have things that they're wanting to share. Um, I In a book I've been reading, and a lot of kind of the framework or the language that I pull from this book because I really like it, but it talks about trauma isn't something that happens to us, but what happens in lack of an empathetic witness. And so, yeah, I want to create space where people can be seen and heard wherever they're at with whatever's going on in their life. Because even though I'm talking about all this stuff I did earlier on, if you're listening, like, I'm not doing all that great, uh, you know. And I say that because I think it's important to the journey and the process that I'm on to just feel things sometimes, not try and process them, not try and understand them, but just let myself feel the emotions. Because actually, this is another thing I thought about in the past, is I tend to think or process about an emotion to try and understand it, but in doing so, am I actually allowing myself to experience the emotion in the first place, or am I avoiding it? It's an interesting thought. um so yeah. um well, I have been streaming for an hour, just talking. uh I'm thankful that people have joined, at least lurking. I know that it takes a bit to like a bit of like a tremendous amount of vulnerability to come up and share where you're at. And if people want to, that's cool. If not, it's also cool. Um, I made this space as a response to this feeling like there isn't, especially on the online space, you get more isolated the more time you spend online. Like we're surrounded in social media, like, but how many of us are actually having like meaningful conversations with each other that help us to be seen? Or does it further our isolation? And it's something for myself. Part of the reason I'm doing it is because I see a lot of organizations and places that are responding to what they think needs are, um, the needs of a community, but they aren't actually the needs. It's just what they think. They haven't done the work to understand the actual needs. So it reminds me of the previous place I worked like 10 years ago, where, or not 10, well, I worked there 10 years, but um, it was a drop in for street entrenched youth in downtown. And we had a one summer, like we used to have like hundreds of kids and different volumes throughout different years, and there'd be like rotations or groups of different kids. But one summer people didn't show up. And we're like, is youth homelessness solved? Like, this is amazing. We didn't think that. We're like, okay, where is everybody? Because what the heck's going on? Why aren't people showing up? And we eventually started to um, try and figure it out. And what we found, it's really interesting. Uh, there were kids, they were hanging out, they were at Tim Hortons. And the reason they were at Tim Hortons is because Tim Hortons had Wi-Fi. And the reason they needed Wi-Fi is because the public library had closed earlier or something, probably to mitigate this group of young people that were going through, or something along those lines. And so we we made steps and tried to figure out Wi-Fi for our drop-in. And once there was Wi-Fi, people started coming like crazy. And so we initially we approached this idea from a standpoint like we knew what the problem was, and we tried to build solutions around what we thought the problem was, and people didn't come to our drop-in. We're like, what the heck? Why this worked before? Why isn't it working now? When we actually spent the time to understand the needs of the community, then we figured out what the actual problem was. And so in the same way with this stream, I believe that there is a need for connection, meaningful connection. And maybe this isn't the format to do it. I don't know. It it's just my pushback against a world that feels so indifferent to everyone. It feels so hyper independent. It feels like you're not allowed to share where you're at without feeling the shame of, yeah, being misunderstood or being judged or being this or that, whatever words you want to add, with or you pay hundreds of dollars to some person who's got far more schooling and ability, but so the place I work, there's a lot of autistic young people who really could benefit from having a conversation with someone, even in just this method. But if they want to try and talk to a professional, there's like a 6-month wait at least from a free standpoint. Like there's just a giant wait list. And I think as things progress economically in the way that I believe that they're going to go, I think the need for these things will become more and more necessary. Uh, so I don't know. There's a lot of things. I could just ramble forever, but uh, yeah, I think I might call it because I don't know if anyone's going to join tonight. Um, I'm glad that people have been listening and paying not paying attention. Sorry, I was distracted. People have been listening and lurking. It helps me beat the almighty algorithm. So even if you're not jumping up there, if there's people here that are watching, it might help it be seen, which then helps other people who want to jump up and participate. But yeah, I don't know. I'm thankful for those that join, who lurk, who type their comments, who are here. Now you could be other places, and you spent some time with me, and I greatly appreciate that. And I hope that you got something from these ramblings tonight. I hope that there's something of value there. And if you have any questions, feel free to continue and maybe you're watching this in the future when it's not live, like post in the comments and I'll get around to responding, because I would love to answer, especially when it comes to autistic things. And I'm not an expert. I'm not saying I'm an expert. Um, I'm merely speaking out of my own experience, my own life, and my experience that is informed by a lot of interactions, some interactions with young people who are also autistic. So, but anyway, regardless, I think I'm going to end. But wherever you are tonight, wherever you find yourself, I want you to know that you're not alone. And I put that at the beginning of my stream as a reminder that when we are together in a place, when we are seen, when we are allowing ourselves to be seen by others, even anonymously, we remind ourselves that even if they don't understand, we aren't alone. It can feel like, especially when you are going through so much, where people might, you feel like no one can possibly understand. I promise you that there are people who do, and there are people that care, and there are people who genuinely love and like who you are. And there'll be more people if you've lost people in your life, if you've lost friendships or relationships. And something I'm been processing and learning is that there will be more people who love and value and appreciate you for you. And so, yeah, wherever you're at this Sunday, I hope that you have a good rest of your evening and know that you are loved, um, and that you're not alone. So, yeah, I'll see you guys next Sunday. For those who are watching or joining at the end, um, I stream. I'm trying to. Well, I have been. I'm going to be streaming this every Sunday evening, basically to create this space. For me, my goal is to give out of what I've experienced, what I've had, and so I'm gonna keep doing this. I don't really care if people like. I mean, obviously, I'd love to grow, but for me, my measure of success is the fact that I keep doing this, and so I want to stay consistent. So on Sundays, at some point, usually during the evening, I'll be live. So maybe you throughout your week have questions or thoughts or things you want to share. Maybe save it for then. And until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a good evening.